Hello and welcome to Criminal Record, the Daily Record's weekly crime podcast. I'm Molly Finlay and I'm joined today by gangland lawyer James McIntyre, as well as our resident crime reporter Norman Sylvester. James, you've been following some of Scotland's most notorious gangs throughout your very exciting life and career. So let's start there. What was your role as an advisor to the McGovern family and other gangland families in Scotland?
I think the situation is when you say advisor, consigliere, advisor, these things they're kind of glorified a bit. I mean, what I did, like many other lawyers, was I acted for various families. I started off in Edinburgh, where I acted for a number of different families. This was years ago. And then moved to Glasgow, and I became very, very friendly with a family in the north of Glasgow, and still am very friendly with them. And I defended them. But as far as advising, you would advise what the law was, but you wouldn't advise how to commit a crime or to commit a crime. You know, people would approach you like any lawyer and ask, you know, about their defence. And I defended some important people, yes.
So tell us, from the beginning, how did you come to represent this family?
I've scratched my mind a bit, or scratched my head and raked my mind about this. I can't really remember exactly the first time. I think it was a very small case, which I was acting for one of the family, the oldest of them all, and my friend, and we became friendly, and then I started to act for various other members. But apart from the two cases which are mentioned in my book, for two of the brothers, which were big cases, one was successful and one wasn't. There was very little to do as far as the defence lawyer was concerned, because you know they weren't caught for doing things, you know, because they've got a hierarchical nature of crime. So I became very friendly with them, as I say, and remained friendly with them. But that just carried on over the years. But as I say, there was no specific. I just got on very well with the oldest brother the very first time I met him. That was it. And
being so friendly, but also being an advisor, did you ever find it difficult to keep a professional distance?
No. I've never understood this this officer of the court carry on. Excuse me. When you have a plumber come to your house, or a doctor speaks to you or something, you're expecting them to treat you for the reason you called them for. And when I defended a client, I defended them to the very best of my ability. This idea that you've somehow got one foot in the prosecution, another foot in the defence, is completely wrong. In my view, it's completely wrong. And people are always talking about ethics. Where are the ethics when it comes to the police? Let's be honest about it. Where are the ethics when it comes to the prosecution? You know, holding back evidence which they know might be exculpatory. The police fitting people up, you know, planting stuff on people, verbaling people up. That means to make up a reply. So, you know, it's gloves off, really. And they're on one side, you're on the other side. They're the prosecution, you're the defence. And that's the way I saw it. Now, I know there's a lot of lawyers don't see it that way. But I think they just want you to sign the legal aid form, and then they start backpedaling. Most of them are wanting to become sheriffs or something like that anyway. So you're onto a loser right away.
You had a reputation of representing people charged with serious crime and giving it 100%.
Oh, absolutely. Well, to me, that's the moral thing to do, to give your client 100%. And I remember being in the agent's room in Edinburgh years ago, and I won't say the person's name. He's now a sheriff. And he was a youngish lawyer like me at the time. And the conversation came up, and somebody said, what would happen if somebody confessed a murder to you? And this guy said, I'd phone the police. I nearly fell off my chair. I couldn't understand what he was talking about. I mean, you know, and that was 30 years ago. So to me, as I say, if you want to be a defence lawyer, you're on the side of the defence. The amicus curiae, or being a friend of the court that they talk about, okay, maybe that's maybe the legal position, the principal position, the ethical position. Certainly wasn't my position, nor would it ever be.
And you represented two members of the McGovern family who were both accused of murder.
That's right. That's right. Tommy was cleared, and Paul was convicted and went on to go to prison, but he's since been released. He's done really well for himself, completely on the straight and narrow, worked incredibly hard, and he's doing very well.
And as well as being a lawyer, you've had your own brush with the law when you were a student. Can you tell us a bit about that, and what were the consequences?
What happened was that we were out one night at a place which rejoiced the name of the Barracuda, a disco in these days, not a nightclub. And on the way home, I had too much to drink myself and another law student. In fact, there was a few of us. We broke a window. People think we broke it. We didn't break in anywhere. We broke a window and pulled a fire guard out of the window. The guy who owned the shop had apparently been, I say this in my book, had apparently been sending out, leaflets, no blacks in Dundee, and selling Nazi memorabilia and all that kind of thing. Very, very kind of Nazi type shop. And we, striking a blow, move for freedom. We thought we were drunk basically, and we broke the window and stole that, and it was made a big thing. We were fined £75, and I worked in the Students' Union collecting glasses at £5 a night, paid off the fine. But it had drastic effects on when I applied for the Law Society, because they voted against me becoming a lawyer, and I had to take it to the High Court. The first time ever in the history of the Law Society, and they held that the Law Society had been unfair the way they ruled against me, and it was sent back to them. And then they had a meeting in front of, I think it was all 42 members, something like 42 members. Was it 42 or 43, whatever it was, and they had a vote, and I got in by one vote. I think it was something like either 21 to 20 or 43 to 21, something like that. That was it. I was then unleashed in society as a solicitor.
And you had another run-in in Edinburgh in the late 80s when you were charged with the attempted murder of a police inspector. Do you want to tell us a bit about that incident?
Yes, there's a bit of background to that. I had been involved in a trial for a family in Edinburgh, and who had allegedly been taking protection money. And I had discovered that apparently, I was told that the main police officer had been sleeping with two of the Crown witnesses in an attempt to get them to give evidence. Now, when it got to court, I put that to the police officer. And of course, that caused him a huge amount of embarrassment, because I think he was a married man. And he wasn't very forgiving about that. And then the two girls came in, and they had suddenly lost their memory. They couldn't remember anything. So the clients walked not guilty. And then it was about the following week. I was about to go to dinner. A procurator's dinner, which is the bar association, you would call it now. And I was going there, and I was going to pick up a friend. And as I was driving to the house, the flat in Edinburgh, I noticed it was a Friday night. I noticed that the street was 7 or 8 people in a one-way street reading newspapers. It was kind of odd on a 5 o'clock on a Friday. And the next thing, they dropped the papers and ran to the car. And I realised it was the cops. Well, I thought it was the cops, but I wasn't sure, because there was all plain clothes. So as they were running towards me, I just started to drive away slowly. And one of the officers, I'm saying officers now but then I wasn't sure. But this guy put his hands on the boot of my car, and I started driving just ticking over. And then he suddenly made a mad dash to try and grab the door handle, and I just took off. And he did a sort of a spectacular, 10 out of 10 Olympic dive to make it as dramatic as possible. And I took off along Slateford Road, driving in and out, in and out, until I got to the lights. And then I saw a marked police car coming up to cut me off, and I realised it was definitely the police. I bumped my car up. I've got it in the book. I bumped it up, the car up onto, it was an Orion Gear Blue 1.8 or whatever. I bumped it up onto the curb, 2 wheels on and 2 wheels off. This is completely true. Got out, locked the door, walked to the back of the car, and the 4 or 5 Peugeot 204s or 205s, whatever they were, that were following me, they're all chasing me, screeched to a halt. And I turned and I said, what's this all about? And one of the cops, plainclothes drug squad, grabbed me, put me, he said, I won't use the words. He swore. I said, grab that so and so, and they uncuff him, and they threw me over the boot of the car and cuffed me, and took me to the police station. Later on, their statements stated that they had overtaken my car, blocked me off. One of them had pulled me out the passenger side, and one of them had pulled me out the driver's side. The statements just did me, and eventually the charges were dropped. And it took about a year. They dropped it from attempted murder. They charged me with attempted murder, and my reply was something like, that's not true. But they kept me in. They kept me in for, I think it was about 10 days in the Digger punishment block in Stockton prison, stripped down, red light on all night, white light on all day. I got them to take me for a meal at one stage. That's in the book as well, but if somebody reads it. But the point is that I found out at the end of the day that the person who they say I tried to run over was the boss of the police officer who I'd said slept with the witnesses. So in my view, it was revenge. I was worried that they were going to try and plant something in the car, because if I get caught, but we're surrounded by police, who's going to believe me? So I was getting out of the car, and they did. They did everything they could, but to no avail. So eventually, the charges were dropped from attempted murder down to assault to danger of life or something like that. And I didn't. And eventually, my lawyer phoned up and said, "Look, they've dropped it to dangerous driving or careless driving, something like that. Will you take a plea rather than risk going?" Because they're all going to, And I said, "Yeah." So I took a plea, and I got fined £400 and banned for a year, which was fine.
You were under surveillance at the time, though, weren't you?
Oh, yeah, I was under surveillance constantly because I was acting for some heavy hitters through Edinburgh.
And you were getting quite a few of the heavy hitters off.
Yes, I was. I was getting a lot of people off.
Did you feel you became a target for the police?
I definitely became a target for the police. Very, very briefly, while I was on bail for that attempted murder, I got sent. I went across. I thought I got away for a week, and I went across to Spain. And while I was there, I met a policeman in the swimming pool from the Met. And we were chatting away, and I'll be very brief about this. But I said, he said, "My father lives over here." He said, "We recently did a dawn raid on a guy who had been an armed robber, an Irishman." And he said, when we kicked his door in, he said, I punched him. Then I went to put the head in him, but he lowered his head and I broke my nose. So we did him with police assault, and I got £1,800 compensation. So that's what paid for my holiday. That was the kind of attitude which the Met took. And we were talking about other things, knife crime, and he said something about, we charge them and let them go. Unless they're black, then they're in for the whole weekend. That was the attitude. Whether it's changed or not, I don't know. But this idea that the cops are there, the knights in shining armour, and the defence lawyers all conspiring with that's just not true. I'm there to give 100% for my client, whoever it happens to be. And you're not up against a fair system. Everything is stacked against you. The judge is stacked against you. The PF is stacked against you. They have everything. They have everything, all the surveillance, all the helicopters, all the stuff, and you've got a legal aid form. So I make no apology for doing the best I could with my clients.
And you've just made a bit of a comparison there to the Met. Did you ever find that there was any difference between the Edinburgh and the Glasgow crime scenes and how potential gangland violence was dealt with differently in each of those cities?
I think Glasgow was perhaps. I had a client whose name I won't mention, but he used to say Edinburgh's for cash and Glasgow's for slash. And whether there's any truth, Edinburgh could be very violent as well. I mean, I know nothing about the things these days. I'm a dinosaur when it comes to that. I'm talking about in the old days. But the Edinburgh did seem to be more money focused. But whether that's true now, I really wouldn't know.
It's often suggested in Edinburgh there's a closer link in the past between the judiciary and the criminal organisation. Did you find that at all? Was that a bit of a myth?
I don't know. I do know that there was a lot of carry on about they called the Magic Circle, which came out years ago about young boys and judges, and but it all came to nothing in the end of the day. I suspect there was something in it. In fact, I suspect there was a lot in it. This is what you find yourself fighting against. That to me, people concentrate so much on what they call organised crime and forget that the establishment. One of the things I find amusing is they say things about Al Capone. They say, "Oh man," or somebody like Carlo Gambino, or one of the greats, leaders of the families, La Cosa Nostra in America or wherever, and they say, "Oh, if only he'd applied his brains to something straight, then he'd have done so well." Straight like Tony Blair, maybe straight like him, or George Bush, who lie about weapons of mass destruction, send thousands of people to their deaths in Iraq, thousands of Iraqis die, thousands of soldiers die, get the limbs blown off, blah, 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 all over an absolute lie. And what happens? Nothing happens to them. That's, to me, organised crime. You look at what's going on just now. I mean, I'm not going to go on both sides, but what in Gaza just now, what's going on in Israel, what's going on in Iran, what's going on in Ukraine and Russia. People are dying by the thousand every day. And yet the leaders, who do these things, and I'm not pro-Trump or anti-Trump, nothing. I'm just saying nothing that happens, they just seem to get richer and everybody else dies. And then people concentrate on, oh no, this happened or that happened in connection with one individual, And I feel that there's a lot of talk just now about drugs. And I find a lot of it to be quite hypocritical. Whiskey has caused an awful lot more trouble in Scotland and domestic violence and other sorts of violence than cocaine ever will, and yet these people who are involved in that business are for some reason targeted. And the idea that there's a war against drugs is laughable. It's just a waste of money. That's all it is. I mean, to me, I'm not need to labour this, but if you talk about, remember the Volstead Act over in America, prohibition. I mean, the biggest mistake, they banned alcohol, no alcohol. So along comes Joe Kennedy, JF Kennedy's dad, and you had right from the beginning, and you had Lucky Luciano, and you had Al Capone, and you had all these guys bringing in the drink from Canada and making their own drink and all the rest of it. And it started the mafia, organised crime, right up in America. And what's the answer here? To decriminalise everything.
You think that's the answer to combat organised crime, to make the drugs legal?
I think
even cocaine.
I think I don't know. I think if cocaine was taken, if it was prescribed or if it was allowed on a restricted basis, then I mean, look at alcohol. You can walk into an off license and buy 10 bottles of vodka, 10 bottles of whiskey, and nobody bothers you. And yet, cocaine, which is so widespread, seems to be a big problem. And the thing is, it's not getting any better. In order to have a war against something, you've got to have people who don't want it to happen. As Al Capone said, as long as men want women drinking and gambling, then I'll be in business. Well, that's the same. If everybody in Britain had been a Nazi during the Second World War, then they wouldn't have stopped the Nazis coming in. But if you understand the analogy, unless society is totally against drugs, it's going to come because it's going to sell. So to me, I think there's a great deal of hypocrisy in the government, in the establishment. You could kick a wee lassie's door down in Easterhouse and get done for a gram of coke, but leave a supermodel who's maybe got 2 ounces in a bag. That kind of thing, to me, is disgusting.
Do you feel now, 30 years on, now that you're not in the thrall of it, you are looking at this kind of crime from a much wider picture, and
yes,
that's why you feel this way? I
do. I think that, as I say, I think that a friend of mine called Matthew Hall, a very, very good writer, BAFTA winner, he said that the reason that the public are so interested in organised crime or true crime is because of the fact that outlaws are the only free men left. There's no bars. They're not politically correct. They don't call women, people who get pregnant. They don't, walk around on rice paper. They say what they say. They believe what they believe. They live how they live. And, whether that's good or bad, but it's in some ways it's far more honest than the way. I mean, look at the woke behaviour just now we're being asked to accept. Ruining women's sports, all sorts of stuff going on, which would, Keir Starmer, who can tell you what a woman is one day and then can tell you what a woman is the next day, and it's two completely different explanations. And that wouldn't happen in the underworld or amongst the outlaws. So to me, there's a great deal of hypocrisy.
Okay. Taking a step back out of the underworld and back to you, tell us about the failed attempt on your life in 1993 at your offices in Glasgow and what happened that day.
It wasn't so much a failed attempt in my life. It was really an attack. I had 3 people came to the office, and who I knew, and one of them attacked me. But the man was mentally ill, and he attacked me, and I was fighting back, and he put his hand in his pocket and he stabbed me. The other 2, I don't think, realised that was going to happen, and they shouted at him and bolted out the door, and then he ran after stabbing me. And I slumped to the ground, as I say, it's in my book. But I went up to the hospital, and I was taken by ambulance to the hospital. And unfortunately, I took a reaction to the anaesthetic that they gave me, which was nothing to do with the actual injuries, although they were severe. But they had to kind of give me the old jolt back because of the fact that I had reacted very, very badly to that. But the person who was the attacker, it wasn't anything to do with gang related, really. It was to do with the man being mentally ill, and I knew him. The police came. I was lying in hospital, covered in iodine from head to foot, being held together by these very good nurses at the Royal, and the Serious Crime Squad came, and they opened the curtain, and they went, "What happened? We want to know what happened." And I said, "I want to win the lottery. Let's see who gets lucky first, And then they said, "Anything happens to him, McIntyre, we're coming for you." So they knew who it was before they asked me, but I never told them because I wouldn't. I don't think you can go through life defending people and doing things and then start telling tales on other people. So something I would never do. But
you declined to identify the man to police, even though you knew.
I refused to. Yes, I said I didn't know who it was at the time. But that was nonsense. But I refused to identify the person.
And not long after that, you earned yourself a nickname, Two Guns. You were given 3 years in jail and struck off from the Law Society. Were you harshly dealt with?
Yes, I was, or no, I wasn't. I mean, because now the minimum is 5 years. The situation is that my defence was that the guns were given to me to hand in to the police at the time. It was just around about an amnesty time. But and again, I mentioned about it in the book. When I was arrested, there was a police there's a SWAT team came and all the rest of it. But when I was arrested, this
was at your home.
I was at my girlfriend's home at the time, and I said, "Yeah, this was the helicopter and the SWAT team and the whole lot." But after I was arrested, and they found these 2 pistols wrapped up in a locked drawer in a locked garage in a locked house, which my defence was were going to be handed in. The inspector who was dealing with the matter and I were in my bedroom, and I said, "That suit in the corner. It's an example of what I'm talking about." I said, that grey suit in the corner, that's one I was wearing yesterday. So I wanted it taken because I had a big gravy stain down it from the shop I'd been in a baker's shop, and I wanted to prove where I'd been. And he said, "Okay, but we'll need to search it to make sure, because you won't get it back in, excuse me, about 18 months. The trial comes up." So I said, "Fine." So we searched the suit, him and I together, and all that was in it was one little wooden broken bead from a set of rosary beads I had. That was it. And so he gave me the suit, and I sat in the back of the police car, right? And they drove me up to Livingston police station. I'm holding the suit. I get in, I get checked in, I hand them over the suit. Remember, this suit's been checked by the inspector and then given to me. And so I get put in a cell, and 2 or 3 hours later, they come to interview me, and they ask me, and I'm not answering any questions. And he says, "Look what we found in your suit pocket," and he pulls out a bullet. This is the same police officer that searched the suit and found nothing. That I searched the suit and found nothing. Yeah, I'm going to leave a bullet in the pocket. And no. But lo and behold, there was the bullet to link. And lo and behold, in a car that they tried to link to me, which was an office car, there were bullets found in the car as well. So that was to link me to the car. And actually, in connection with that car, the police officers were caught out by committing perjury because they gave that name of the wrong car in court. So,
your argument was the 2 guns they found in the premises had been given to you by a client.
Correct.
To hand in as part of
That's correct.
Official police amnesty.
That's correct. The client's no longer with us, and the client said that in court, but the jury unanimously disbelieved the defence. It's always kind of amusing how it was unanimous, because one of the guys fell asleep the first day of the trial in the jury, and somebody must have woken him up and told him the verdict. So, but it was unanimous, and I got the 3 years.
And what was that like, serving time in prison?
It wasn't. Not prison isn't very nice, especially when I was there, because of the fact it was the kind of, there was nothing like the facilities there are now. It was very much peeing into a potty and all the rest of it, But what I will say is I was treated with a great deal of respect, and by people that I'd acted for in Glasgow and in Edinburgh, and on both sides of the fence, on both religious sides, sectarian sides, whether they were Rangers support, put it that way, or Celtic, whatever. I think I got about 300 and odd cards sent to me when I arrived in prison. I got really nice letters. I got really nice messages sent to me, and people visited me again from both sides of the religious divide, and people I'd acted for. And I think there was maybe, in that whole time I was in, about two lawyers who ever bothered to come and visit me. I'm not saying visit me in prison, but in the agent's visit, they could have said there was one who's a friend of mine called Dick White, and another guy, and nobody else. So this is what I mean. These people were loyal to me, and I would be loyal to them. The 2 guns thing, if I could just say, what happened was after a year. What happened was very, very quickly. I don't want to give you. My first day, they give me they say, McIntyre, down the stairs, agent's room. I think it's my wee brother come to visit me because he's a criminal lawyer. He's just retired, and he's an author. And they say, so I go down, and lo and behold, it's the top brass from the prison. And so there's 4 of them squashed into a corner, and I'm on the other side of the table. And they said, listen, all the people in this prison, their dads, their clients. Remember, this would be back in 1997, and nearly 30 years ago. And they basically said, would I start grassing? Would I find out where the heroin? They said to me, we've got a big heroin problem. And I said, well, have you ever thought of seeking counselling for that? And they didn't think that was funny. But anyway, they then said to me, well, would I start making inquiries? And I said, Tammy, don't be ridiculous. You really? Informing people, be a grass. I said, take me back to my cell. No danger of me talking to you again. Because they had promised me I could be the governor's tea boy and have my own cell, and in the E-hall, which is where you get a key, you can go in and out, do what you like. I said no, so they stuck me in the worst part they could possibly stick me in. And after a year, they had to let me go to the open. They had to. That was the third of the sentence. And I went up, and foolishly, for a joke, which they didn't find funny either, I made a wooden gun while I was in prison. I carved it out of wood in a bandsaw, and I got pulled up with the deputy governor who hated me, and he said, you could have painted this black and used it to escape. I said, I don't know if you noticed, but I could have got a bus to escape. It's an open prison. But anyway, they sent me back in chains to Stockton. And as I walked in the door, somebody in the second flat shouted. Now, I didn't have the nickname at the time. Somebody shouted, Jimmy 2 Guns is back. And I shouted up, it should be Jimmy 3 Guns. I just made another one in the open. And the 2 guns stuck. So it's not, I'm no hard man, I'm no gangster. It was a joke, the 2 guns. And in fact, with the book, my book, Jimmy 2 Guns, publishers have they wanted the guns in the front of the cover and all that. I wanted it to be a wee boy on a tricycle firing 2 pistols in the air, like in a cowboy hat, because I've got a photograph of myself when I was wee doing that. But they wanted it to be a more serious kind of thing. But the 2 guns, as I say, I'm no hard man. The 2 guns was a joke, and it remains to be one.
Publishers and writers, they love to glamorize.
Well, that's right. That's
like
why they
that.
say things like consigliere and all the rest of it. I was very, very friendly with Paul Ferris, who also wrote. He's been very successful in writing a number of books. He wrote the foreword for my book.
And you actually use your own experiences to inform your new career as a TV scriptwriter.
That's right.
So tell us about how have you drawn on all these many experiences that you've had, both as a lawyer and on the other side of the criminal justice system?
It certainly helps because you know the way things are going. You know I've written quite a lot of stuff for the character Lenny in River City. Unfortunately, that's coming to an end now. River
It's
City.
Lenny Murdoch, isn't it?
Lenny Murdoch, Frank Gallagher, great actor. Unfortunately, that's coming to an end now. I'm very pally with the executive producer there, Martin McCarthy. That's coming to an end. I've done a bit of EastEnders and Taggart and things like that, but I'm also written the script about Jimmy Two Guns. It's all purely fictional.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I'm very keen on and doing is not referring to real life cases because of the fact you want to remain true to your own beliefs. So but yes, it's helped me a great deal knowing one of the things. If you look at Netflix just now or things like that, you have Mobland, you have Gangs of London, Gangs of Naples, Gomorrah. The Sopranos was on, of course. Sopranos is more comedy, I suppose, in some ways. But there's El Chapo. Escobar, Queen of the South, cannabis, cocaine queen. It's full of, and I think people are fascinated by crime, by organised crime. And my belief, like Matthew Hall, my friend, is I think it's because people, at the end of the day, admire the way that people have their own code, their own honour, the way they deal with things, and they deal with matters internally within themselves. They're not harming other people. You can say, oh yeah, they're harming other people by selling drugs. Yeah, they're not giving the drugs away. People are buying them because they want them. I mean, I was in Sainsbury's the other day there. I couldn't believe it when this woman bought a packet of Silk Cut in front of me, cigarettes. £20. £20 for a packet of cigarettes. The government I'm sorry to sound, I'm not political, but the government tax your income tax. If you put money away and buy a property, they tax that when you sell it. Your mother and father died. My mother and father passed away my mother very recently at 99. Any inheritance tax, they tax VAT. Every single way they can tax you, they tax you. And yet, people have got to live, so they tax. I don't drink anymore. I bought a non-alcoholic beer the other day. They're non-alcoholic. £5.75 for a bottle of beer with no alcohol in it, and then they wonder why people are smuggling cigarettes and people are smuggling this. It's very, when you put things beyond people's reach and make things unobtainable, especially things they want, you're onto a loser.
And just on, you mentioned you don't drink anymore. You're now a practicing Christian. It sounds like you've had a bit of reform in your life. How does that square with your past, do you feel?
I've always been a Christian, always, right through even the times when I wasn't acting very Christian-like. But I would call my non-Christian-like behaviour, perhaps, when I was younger, but nothing to do with my legal practice. I don't believe that anything I did in my legal practice was unchristian-like. So I'm not sorry, and I would do it all again. I'm not the slightest bit sorry about defending people to the best of my ability, fighting. I was on the side of the angels as far as I'm concerned, So, in our private life, we've all done things in which we regret. Maybe we've two-timed a girlfriend, or we've been rude to somebody or nasty to somebody or whatever. That's one thing. But as far as my legal profession is concerned, my legal career, then I was fighting for my client. And when I was out of prison, just got out, I was approached by the Serious Crime Squad in connection with the murder of Tony McGovern, who was one of the McGovern family who I knew very well. And they just said they wanted to question me because I'd been done for firearms. It was a routine matter. And as they left, they said, what the matter with you was? And I said, I didn't know what he meant. And he said, far too many people were getting off. And they walked out. You had to go. And they walked away. I was very proud of that, actually. But that was the reason, let's not pretend it was because I was any big drug kingpin, because I wasn't. I was just defending people. But, you know, and I'll probably, I mean, get roused for saying this, but, you know, the defence, some of those defence lawyers, they couldn't fight sleep. Seriously, you know, it's appalling. Sign the legal aid and then see what I can do with the PF for you.
You think there's a poor standard
Oh,
of defence?
it's pathetic. It's pathetic. It's been pathetic for years.
Would you think after your conviction, your jail sentence, you were struck off?
Yes, I was.
Society? Was that fair?
What very briefly again happened there was they took me in front of the Law Society disciplinary committee, and you could either get struck off or fined, and maybe your license restricted, so you got to work with somebody else for a period of time, blah, blah, blah. And then right down to the smallest punishment is admonished. They admonished me. That was it. So I'm out of prison and I'm back in business, right? Well, actually, I was still in prison. But when I got out, I was back in business. And for the first time in history, again, the Law Society appealed against the Law Society, right? So the Law Society appealed the decision of its own tribunal. And they took me in front of Lord McCluskey, who kicked the Law Society up and down the court for about half an hour, but then said, however, and gave them a second chance. And I was going to, I was out this time.
That was the end of your legal career.
That's right. Well, I was going to, no, so I was sent to, they gave me a second chance. I went in front of the panel again, but this time there was no 7 different people. There was 5 past presidents of the Law Society. So old men, you know, and they went from admonishing me right through the spectrum and struck me off. And the funny thing is that they struck off the wrong James McIntyre. They struck off some poor guy up in Aberdeen who's called James McIntyre. So he was off the record for a day or two. And then eventually they got me and struck me off. But that was fine because I've had a new career as a writer and I've enjoyed that and still am enjoying it every bit as much as as my legal career. But I've always been, I like to think I've always been true to my clients, whoever they were, and I've never ever given any assistance to the other side.
And finally, James, do you want to tell us what the name of your book is and where people might?
My book is called Jimmy Two Guns. It's by me. It's available from Amazon. It's available in bookshops, and it's also available on Audible, with me reading it. And it's if you get it on Audible, it's also free on Kindle then.
Fantastic. Thank you very, very much. Thank you, James McIntyre and Norman, as usual, for joining us. And thanks to our audience for tuning in to Criminal Record. If you have any questions for the team, you can email reporters@dailyrecord.co.uk with the subject line Criminal Record. We'll be back next week. In the meantime, you can subscribe to listen to this podcast on Spotify or Apple by searching for Criminal Record, or you can watch it each week on our YouTube channel. Thank you very much.